Hey guys, welcome back to the Real Love Podcast. We're so excited that you're spending time with us again. Again, we're so proud of you for taking time to invest in yourself and to grow and to be all that God has called you to be. I have my lovely wife with me again. Rachel, you want to say hey?
Hi guys, how you doing?
We are so glad to be with you. We love you. Again, we do not take this time lightly. We believe God has such a massive plan for your life. So no matter where you're at, I really ask that you'll jot down, whether it's on your phone or whatever's best for you, a few things that you feel like, hey, I need to do this because of this time. Let's make it to where there's application and then there's transformation, not just information. So we've been talking a lot about growth this year so far. We talked about personal growth plans and words in January. In our last podcast, we talked about growing together, which is huge. We care so much about that. But now what we want to do is I want to take some time and think about what kind of atmosphere are you creating for people to grow around you. And so especially if you have kids, you really need to zone in. If you lead a team or if you lead a group, if there are people who are watching you to take their cues from how they should grow, you really need to zone in here. And so I just want to set this up for us and really just ask it this way. What kind of culture are you creating for people to grow in? So what kind of growth culture are you creating? And so you may think, well, hey, Zach, how do I know what kind of culture, like growth culture I'm creating? Again, whether this is your family, with your kids, I think it's the most important with your kids. I mean, work teams are important. I love the team I work with, all that stuff, but your family, this is massive for them. So you may think, hey, how am I supposed to do this? Well, the way I want you to think about it, how we define it, is the way that those people think, act, and interact. So when you think about, hey, what kind of culture am I creating? What can you check? What can you put a little thermostat into, a thermometer into to check the way people are thinking, the way people are acting, or the way that people are interacting? So we'll use our kids and some other examples. But Rachel, is there a way that, act is pretty easy. Like, this is how you're acting, right? And interacting is even, it's like an external manifestation, right? So you can see it. But what about how people are thinking? So when we're developing the kids, when we're making that very intentional environment for them to grow in, how are we telling how they're thinking when it's going away we don't want it to go?
Well, I think you have to remember, like, a culture is the environment. So your culture the environment that exists, you'll see different things grow. So like if you're in the desert, you'll see certain plants grow. If you're in a rainforest, you'll see certain plants grow. So when you go into the culture of your business, your small group, your home, you'll see specific things growing. So for example, with our children, you can see the way somebody thinks by how they act and interact with others. So I have to slow them down really and stop and say, hey, and just ask the question, hey, what led you to say that? Or, hey, what do you think is causing what you're feeling right now? So if there's a fight over a marker, we're going to make it really simple. This is not real life at all. Mm-hmm. Somebody left the lid off a marker. Somebody's marker is ruined. And now there's this incredible response where it says, I'm never going to let you use anything that I have ever again. And I say, hey, I'm going to stop the conversation. I'm going to help protect both of you. I want to stop you from saying something that you don't mean, and I want to protect this other person from hearing some things that could hurt their heart as much as I can, and say, hey, what made you think that you can't ever share anything again? Well, that's the spirit of poverty. If you mess up this, I'm never going to have another marker. And so I can slow down and say, hey, you don't operate out of little. You serve a God of abundance. So we can be generous and we can share even if things don't go the way we wanted to. So it's simple talking to a child, but you can see the same thing happen in your work relationships where you say, hey, I'm just not going to share information with that person anymore because it blew up in my face. Well, hey, we operate out of trust. And so we're going to share and be vulnerable. I know it didn't go well this one time, but I want to help make sure the way that you're responding has led me to see that your thinking is, however you're thinking, didn't grow the exact the interpersonal relationship that I wanted to see.
Right. And so, again, we want to see how people are thinking, acting, and interacting to know what kind of culture we're building. And again, acting and interacting are a little easier to see, but and again, I think Rachel did a great job there. But what I want to make sure is that if you don't have a humble and patient spirit about you, you'll actually never know what people are thinking. And so a really super simple example, we were at the dinner table last night, and JL, our daughter who's 8, was talking to our son River who's 4, and one of them, I think River said that he cheated on his girlfriend.
He should not have a girlfriend.
Right,
First
we've
of
made
all.
that very clear, but either way. And so River said he cheated, but it was so funny. So Rachel said, "Hey, what does that mean?" It was the perfect response. Hey, what does that mean? And I think JL was like, it's where you don't like somebody more, so you break up with them. But it was just an interesting, like, it's if you don't respond very intentionally, you'll never know how somebody thinks. So my dad, one of my heroes, he calls it spotlighting, is when somebody's thinking something and you want to get information about it, but you just like shine a light on one thing. Like, so if JL and River were talking and River said, I cheated on my girlfriend, and we said, hey, that's wrong. What did you do? It's spotlighted. He's in the wrong, shame, guilt, reeling, because they're not even saying what the word actually means, right? They're confused, and they don't even know they're confused, which is a whole nother comical part about making an environment for people to grow. But the question of, hey, what does that mean? Why do you think that? But that question, hey, why do you think that? But it takes a real measure of patience and a real desire for people to grow, to slow down, to be able to do that. But so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 4 really categories, 4 levels of growth, of the culture that you can create. And so we're going to start the lowest and we're going to work our way up. So Rachel, what is that lowest form of, like, if the culture that we're creating, what's the lowest form of culture?
It's a complacent culture. And so that complacent culture, really, you're resting on success. There's no drive. It's not like you're trying to utilize any processes. You haven't there's no space and no place. You don't have a word for the year. You're coasting, resting on the status quo of what everybody else is doing and just maintaining.
Right. And I would say, again, the definition that we had talked about was resting on success. But what I would say is that another way to look at that is assumed success, or assume that everything's okay. And so, but we know, like, the flow of the world is really, if you're a believer, it's in opposition. And so, like, the flow of finances, I mean, you can look by national average, the flow of finances is debt. The flow of marriage is divorce. The flow of purity is not, right? So, like, there's a flow going against, like, how God calls us to live certain ways. And so when we talk about the lowest form of culture you can build is complacent, and I would say that this is what happens by default. And so it is surviving instead of thriving. It is not, there's no potential, there's no purpose being reached. So just to ask yourself, hey, am I building a complacent culture? And so the way that I would just start that, again, going back to the measurements we're going to use, the way people think, act, and interact. Do you have any input in that? Do you have any conversation about that? Do you have any pursuit of that? Again, if we're talking about a team you're leading at work, like, are there guardrails for how people think, act, and interact? If there's not, then you probably have a complacent culture, And then unfortunately, what we tend to do is when you have a complacent culture, you tend to blame. But if you're the leader, then this is a big deal. So first, everybody's the leader themselves. You have to lead yourself first. When it comes to your growth, do you have, again, that's why we talk about having a word, a verse, a growth plan, those things, is because that gives you at least one step out of complacency, right? One step out of just assuming that I'm going to end up where I want to get, which virtually never happens. But I think that's a big one. Hey, Rach, what are some ways that, like in the home, that it could be with us, it could be as you help mentor families, but what is probably like the most common place that we see complacency in homes instead of a growth culture that we want to have?
I see the most complacency in homes when it comes to spiritual development. So having a home that is that kind of what you're getting at? I really it really is by default. So we're super intentional, and I watch my Zach's brother and our sister-in-law Joy and Micah. Joy is super intentional in putting the word into her children, and I can see families, the difference in conversations, because they're intentional to make sure I'm shaping the way that you think about this, so that as your feelings will follow suit, your actions will follow suit. But most families we are so busy. I mean, I was out the door at 7:00 this morning, kids dressed, everybody fed, and we're booking it until we get home tonight at 6:30, where I'll feed everybody. They'll take a shower, and you'll do Bible time, and they'll go to bed. If we haven't created intentional conversations and spaces and times where we shape the way that they think about God and about others, we won't see any development there. And so we have a generation, an underparented, undiscipled generation coming, really like a lot of our peers, and then those coming up after us, because there's been no spiritual development. And so I'm not seeing any growth there on their own. They're not leading themselves in it, certainly, and they haven't been taught how to help somebody else do the same.
Right. And so to make it really practical, again, Rachel's, which I would agree, the biggest place we see not like a growth culture being built is in the spiritual factors of the family. But I would say, and Rachel referenced it there, is I would say that we don't take advantage of natural transition points. So mealtime, like if we're not careful, all meals be eaten in front of the TV. Watch. I get that. I love turning my brain off and eating at the same time. That's like euphoric. It's amazing. But taking advantage of natural transition time. So I would say the ones I take the most advantage with before I leave, with whoever's awake. But the real big ones, it would be dinner. We ask a couple questions every time at dinner. What was the best part of your day? What was the most challenging part? That kind of deal. But then my big one that I get with the kids is Bible time before we go to bed, which we're going to build on this at the next level.
Well, and mine is car time, because that's the most, I spend a lot of time with the kids in the car. So I have a book like in car line that we use to ask questions. So we are dialoguing about the questions about who God is and their purpose and what God has for them.
And so I would just say, like, what's my first step out of a complacent culture?
Yep.
Pick at least one area where you're going to take full advantage of that transition time. And so again, and there's tons of resources, like you said. There's a book Rachel references uses in the car, like in the car line. I use the YouVersion Bible Experience to do Bible time at night. That and the kids' Bible app, both YouVersion. But those are things that I use. But again, though that's not enough. But that is a first. That is not that's not enough. There is more, which we're actually going to build on that.
And it doesn't have to be spiritual. Maybe you've got some really great spiritual things happening in your home, but you're not breeding healthy relationships or communication. And so you may have some of the spiritual things that you want, but you may not have the relational or work ethic things that you want coming out of the environments that you're in. So you can do the same thing. Hey, I'm going to take advantage of transition points and focus on whatever it is you want to see growing in the culture you're creating.
Right. And so that first level that we want to start building from is complacent. And then the next one that we would say is compliant. Compliant. So we have complacent and then compliant. And compliant is just following the rules. That's just following the rules. And so, and as you build your way out of complacent and you start to do things like taking advantage of transition times, what's in the car, or bedtime, or again, your weekly meeting as a team, whatever it might be, taking advantage. That it could, if you're not careful, that could be all it is. So all it is playing a video from like the YouVersion Kids Bible thing, if you're talking about your kids, or having an agenda for the meeting, like just going from complacent to compliant, having these things. But there is more to it. And so let's use the example that you have with the book in the car. So there's a difference between just reading it and having them repeat it, but then really putting yourself into it. And so I'm wanting to help people figure out, okay, I put these things in place, I am compliant with it, but starting to go to the next level. And again, just for time's sake, we know the things that may force us into compliance is just we're tired, at least I'm doing this. But what is it that helps you push past and make the most of those? So you have things you comply with. What inspires you? What pushes you to make the most out of those, like that pushes past compliance? What drives you to, again, give your absolute best to something that seems mediocre or trivial? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I'm not promised tomorrow. I have today, and this is the gift that God's given me today. And so if I don't choose to wring every opportunity out of what God's given me today, I may not have tomorrow to have that conversation. I may not have the opportunity to inspire and encourage. So if really it is a perspective of, I believe God has plans to prosper, not to harm me, plans for a hope and a future. But I also know that I am human, and that if I'm banking on something that hasn't happened yet, I'm operating at a deficit. So especially with our children, we just assume, well, I'll just do it tomorrow, or, it's not that big a deal, they're little. But the reality is every day is one less day that they're with you. And the older they get, the less influence you have. You're really moving from instructional and helping them shape to a peer role. So I don't want to waste or despise the season I'm in. I want to get the most out of it that I can. And when I choose to do that, it helps me. I get better. I am more satisfied and fulfilled when I'm helping other people go beyond just the agenda at the meeting, going beyond just reading the book and asking the questions.
Right. That's so good. It really is. It's really comes down to intentionality. And Rachel said, we're not promised tomorrow, which is so true. And that's the mindset we need to live with. To give it to you another way as well is to really think that these moments, again, going back to the measurements we said, these moments will affect how the people that you're leading, again, kids, team, group, they are going to affect how people think, act, and interact. And you look at quality of life. Quality of life really does come down to those things in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. How do I think? How do I act? How do I interact with other people? And so each one of these moments really has a compounding effect. And so we really want you as the leader in whatever situation you're in, you as the catalyst for growth, for you to go beyond compliant to the next level. Babe, what's that next level?
So we want to move to a place with a committed culture. And this is when we're starting to see production. So we're not just, going by, okay, I have a space and a place, I've got my word, but now we're seeing fruit.
That next one is commitment. And so for you as somebody who's creating this space for commitment, and again, Rachel used the word production, but this goes to you. If you have people that you're leading, I want to encourage you to really know where you want them to go. I would say that if you don't know where you're taking somebody, you're not really leading them. And so again, our kids, we have words and verses for our kids. And JL was old enough this year to do her own word, which is light, and then River's 4. And so we gave him one. And I've been praying self-control over valor because he's a wild man and his emotions really do seem so big. And so, but again, so I'm leading them. And so if they are not in a place to give me where they want to go, then I give them where I feel like, hey, this is where we need to go. And so the reason that I say that is because if you don't have somewhere you believe that you're leading these people, then like production or moving forward is going to be impossible. Because we want more than behavior modification. We don't just want people to act a certain way, and that'll get into the last, level, the last culture that we want to build.
Well, hey, and just a note so that you can think about, well, hey, some of those sound similar, that compliant and committed. I'm doing the same actions. Think about the difference in your thought process. When you're in a compliant culture, you're operating by processes. You've got procedures. You have boundaries in place to help you create those moments. But it's more about just avoiding mistakes. It's just about making sure I'm just doing the right thing. I'm doing the right thing. And when you're in a committed space, then you're seeing people set goals. So when Zac was saying, hey, I want to know where we're going. So what goals do you have for the people that are in your circle of influence?
Right. And again, this is huge. And again, you talk about, hey, how do I know if people are committed? Well, how are they thinking? How are they acting? And how are they interacting? And again, those are just things that we'll go back to and we'll look at to see, hey, are people committed to this? Just an example, River's word is bold. And so we want River to be bold. River is so kind and he's so sweet, but because he is that way, he gets feelings hurt so fast, and then he can just be timid to jump out and to do stuff. And so our deal for him is we want him to be bold. And so, again, part of being committed is knowing where you want them to go. I bring that up to say with River, we can tell by how he's interacting to opportunities. We can tell how his self-talk looks like. And so there are ways to look and see, hey, are we heading towards commitment? And we're doing that by, hey, how are they thinking? How are they acting? How are they interacting? How are they doing that? But again, the note for the leader, for somebody who's creating an environment for growth, the number one is knowing where you want to lead the people. Again, if you don't know where you're going, you're not really leading them. And so knowing where you want them to go and then garnering their commitment to get there. And again, if you listen to the last podcast, we talked about being dream managers, we talked about those things, but this right here is essential if you want to lead anybody anywhere. Where are you taking them? And then cast a vision for what it's going to be like when they get there. That's what's going to get this commitment. A lot of times as a leader, whether that's a parent or a leader of a team, a lot of time you have to help paint the preferred future that this person is living, leading, and going towards. And so again, I'm just trying to help paint a picture for what a committed culture to growth looks like.
When it requires a level of presence that most of us are unwilling to be selfless enough to see manifest. You have to be present. You have to have proximity with your people. So you're talking about your kids, like you have to be around them enough to recognize those patterns of behavior, so of how they're acting and how they're interacting, so that you can start mining what they're thinking. That goes for your teams as well. Like if you're sitting, for lack of a better term, you might think about your boss just sits in an ivory tower and just tells you what to do, and then you have to deal with it. Well, if you could help create some proximity, they might see that the culture that they want isn't the culture that exists. So just remember, if you're wanting to help somebody take their next steps, grow, you want this committed culture, you have to be willing to have proximity and be present and have enough space that you can slow down and mine those thoughts and watch those actions and interactions that are happening.
That's right. And so again, we want to honor your time, but we've talked through complacent, compliant, committed, and then the last one is courageous. And again, some of the with some of the kind of the outflows of the way people think, act, or interact with complacent, people are just trying to survive. They're just trying to make it instead of thrive. With compliant, they're just trying to follow whatever rules. You wouldn't say there's a lot of passion to it. They're just trying to follow these rules. Committed, there's starting to be some life to it, some visions, some dreaming towards what could happen in this growth. Where am I going? And this next one is courageous. And what's so special about courageous is that it brings purpose. And really what the goal, the desire is whenever you're creating a growth environment, again, for your family, for a team, is that you would help people grow into purpose-driven individuals, purpose-driven people. This is how we'll see really a big change in our world is whenever we can help grow, create, and multiply purpose-driven people on teams and families. And so, hey, Rach, what are some things you feel like we do at our house that helps foster a courageous growth environment, but foster purpose in ourselves and our kids?
It's a part of daily conversation. So, I mean, like even today, I asked River, hey, what are you most excited about today? So in the car, I'm dropping him off at school. What are you most excited about today? Well, I'm excited about being at school. Why are you excited about being at school? Well, because I wasn't with my friends. Oh, so you want to, and I help articulate what he is unable to, or maybe articulate the way I want him to think. Hey, you're excited to be with people. Yes. Hey, what do we do when we're with people? We love people. We do. Hey, how can we love our teacher today? How can we love our friend today? And, he's very clear he will not kiss the girl in his class. That is a part of the conversation. Yes, that is not how we're going to love them. But really, hey, it's about more than just receiving. For us in our home, it's important that we're helping people love God, love people, discover their purpose, and win their world. And so we teach our children that purpose, that is so important. And so we say it. Hey, what are we going to do today? We're going to love God. We're going to love people. We're going to discover our purpose. We're going to win the world. And they know that. It's normal conversation in our house, which sounds weird, but we're weirdos. Mm-hmm. And that difference causes River to have thoughts that influence the way he acts and interacts with others.
Right. And so again, I want to just put it in different language. What Rachel said is amazing. But as your people are growing, as the people that you are fostering this culture of growth with, would you say that the way they think, act, or interact, is it courageous? Is it where it's full of purpose? Is it where it's forward moving? And so painting that picture for them. And then I want to give you one other practical thing that I'll do. Obviously, Rachel, it's great having those conversations, helping them articulate it. But one of the transition points in our home is bedtime. And so after Bible time, when I put them to bed, I really do. I have a hold of their face, or I hold JL now. River, I have to grab his face, make sure he's paying attention. But I try to speak all the words of life over him that I can. And so for JL, I'll hold her, and almost every night I'll say, baby, I'm so glad you're my daughter. I love you. I believe in you. I'm proud of you. You're full of the Holy Spirit. You're powerful. You're smart. You're beautiful. You have self-control. You're humble. And so I'll go through these until I run out of things to say. And I always end, not right now, end with their word. Hey, you are the light. Remember, you are the light. God sets you apart for this. And so again, that courageous example, but also that courageous life spoken into them, I think is huge. And so the big thing I want to make sure, and Rachel, I'll have you say, just something briefly about this, but I feel like the biggest thing holding us back from creating a growth culture, I think the biggest thing that keeps us in complacency or compliance is shame. Is shame that we can't do it, shame that we're not good enough. And shame just isn't from God. And I know it's a real passion for Rachel. So what would you say to people who want to see this manifest? They want a courageous culture. They want a forward-moving culture with their family, with their kids, with their staff team, whatever it might be. What would you tell them in the ways of overcoming shame so that we can move forward?
So shame is a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by the consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. So if you might be like me, and I was trapped in this cycle where I would just like self-punish. So I would make this wrong decision and I wouldn't do something, and I'll put that in quotes, perfect, or what I should have done. And I would think about it all day long. You could have done that. You should have done that. And so what I would remind you of, if you find yourself in that place thinking about your home or your team, and you are overwhelmed by shame, that's a spirit that you can rebuke that, and you can be delivered of it. And the first step is recognizing it. And so calling it out for what it is. So if you're feeling shame, especially when it comes to creating a space where people are going to grow, then you need to say, hey, I feel shame over this, that what I have done or should have done or didn't even know I could do. And then take it before the Lord. Tell the Holy Spirit, I am experiencing this, and I know that that's not what you've called me to, that's not what you have for me. Nowhere in the Word do I read, I have a spirit of shame for you. That's not what God says. And so what we need to do is do our own personal work, so that we can operate not out of shame and insecurity, but out of life abundantly and joy, so we can operate in that strength that God's given us. So the first step is calling it out, and the second step is taking it before the Lord. And then I would even and share that maybe with somebody, a mentor, somebody on your prayer team, in your small group. Say, hey, I've experienced this and I don't want to operate out of that anymore. Will you pray with me? Will you encourage me? Will you hold me accountable when I start speaking things over myself, or you hear it in the way I'm talking about something else? And allow for me to help me walk in victory.
Yeah. And so we are at time. I just realized, I'm so sorry, but we just want you to know we believe in you, and you really can. You can create a growth culture in your home, on your team, again, for yourself. And we just want to encourage you to watch, how do people think? How do people interact? Or how do people act? How do people interact? And we just believe that you can create a courageous culture. And so again, we love you, we're proud of you, and we hope you have an amazing day. And again, congratulations for developing yourself. We'll see you next time.